Thrilled to welcome on and say hello to Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch and the author of Rights and Freedoms in Peril, an investigative report on the left's attack on America. So, Tom, we appreciate you being here on WMAL. The news today, Jack Smith filing a motion to dismiss all charges against President Trump. What surprised you, if at all, about this news today?
Well, what's outrageous is it took so long. It's no surprise the public essentially vindicated Trump on Election Day, found him innocent in many ways by putting back in the presidency and rejected the lawfare. There was never any good faith basis to proceed, and he was facing significant hurdles. Jack Smith was with the constitutional decision by the Supreme Court that there were significant immunity issues from the get-go and everything he was doing against Trump. So this was a retaliatory prosecution about nothing, and it should die a death and never come back again. And even though Jack Smith is trying to work it so that somehow it might come back after Trump leaves office, but I don't think that's going to work in the end.
Now, how is he trying to do that?
Well, he wants it to be dismissed without prejudice, and you don't have to be a lawyer to understand that means that it can come back. If it's dismissed with prejudice, it means it can't come back.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully President Trump, once he becomes president, can really make sure it doesn't come back or issue appropriate pardons to ensure that he's protected and other Americans are protected, because not just him has been abused by Jack Smith, but other innocent Americans as well. Heck, I was brought in as a witness to the grand jury. They harassed me for 4 hours. I want justice. And frankly, this should be the beginning, not the end, of accountability for the gang that targeted Trump from the White House on down.
So what would that look like when you talk about Donald Trump getting in there, cleaning all this up? Of course, we've talked about whether it was Matt Gaetz and now likely to be Pam Bondi cleaning up the DOJ. What does that look like specifically once Donald Trump gets in there and his people get confirmed come January?
Well, there's all sorts of policy and process issues they can address in the Justice Department. It's a corrupted organization, so it needs to be cleaned house just administratively. But in terms of these abuses of power, there should be a criminal investigation. I mean, if they were targeting someone, as we suspect, not because they did anything wrong, but in retaliation for political activity, First Amendment protected activity, that would be a crime, and those involved should be questioned about it.
Mm-hmm. So, and that is something that can happen right out of the gates. I mean, what is a realistic timeline on all these things happening once Donald Trump gets back in there?
Well, if I were Trump, I'd do it from the get-go, appoint a prosecutor. It doesn't have to be a special prosecutor, but ensure there's an independent entity investigating what went on in this Justice Department. Remember, they didn't want to move against Trump, and they were forced to by the Biden White House. And I tell you, if it was politics behind this, if it was just retaliation, the courts already found that Jack Smith was unconstitutionally appointed. The courts already found the charges he was pursuing, or key parts of the pursuit, were constitutionally wanting. So there's lawlessness confirmed, and the question is what accountability should be there for that. And if we're going to have a system that works, prosecutors who abuse their power to target people, to deprive them of their civil rights, which is what they did to Trump, need to be held accountable. And there's no immunity for that.
Do you see a situation? I mean, I think we all know how this is going to play out from a media perspective, and that's where I want to get your next thoughts here, Tom. The media, when Trump gets in there and hopefully does exactly what you're explaining here, they're going to say that he's suddenly weaponizing the Justice Department, and oh my goodness, this is the craziest thing ever. Do you see that coming, Tom? And if so, what's the simple response to it?
Well, the media is just a voice for the abusers. They were co-conspirators. So, of course, they're going to object to it because they were involved in it. And they know what was done wrong because they were getting illegal leaks and other heads up as to what was going on. So it's kind of like the crooks saying, don't investigate us. The media is part of the conspiracy.
And when it comes to Pam Bondi in particular, Tom, and obviously knowing that she is someone who Donald Trump has used before in a private capacity and trusts. Is this someone who you think is up to the job, up to the task in overseeing and running this DOJ and cleaning up some of the things that you've been talking about here on the show?
I do think she is, but I don't trust the Justice Department to investigate the Justice Department. There's no slur or lack of distrust in Pam Bondi, because if she's picking folks in the Justice Department to investigate the Justice Department, we know how that's going to work. There should be an investigation from outside the Justice Department. It's a bigger issue than just the Justice Department. It's an issue about how there was collaboration and collusion between Democratic Party operatives and politicians throughout the country to target Trump and his supporters over their daring to dispute an election.
Mm-hmm. So who would that be? Would that be would that be Congress, or who would that entail if it's not a?
I might be I might be the skunk at the party as to what should be done, because people don't want to hear what ought to be done. But I think the president should appoint a special prosecutor out of the White House.
Is there someone you have in mind for that?
The prosecutor should report to the president.
Yeah.
Of course, and that's been done before, and he should do it now.
Mm-hmm. Someone you want to see do that, Tom?
We know how it's what?
Someone you want to see do that? Someone you think would be good for that spot?
No, there are many people who could be on that list, some of whom have been mentioned for Attorney General and others who haven't, but would be effective special prosecutors.
Jack Smith. We are talking about the Jack Smith case, of course, with Tom Fitton on WMAL. Pete Mundo filling in for Vince Coglianese. So the timing of this, I mean, is this one of those things that you think we were just waiting, or they were waiting for Thanksgiving week, dump it now on a Monday of a holiday week, no one's really paying attention, try to slide this thing under the rug? Is that how and why you think this played out the way it did, Tom?
Yeah, I think your analysis of the timing is correct. And remember, Jack Smith isn't shutting down. He's still probably working on this smear job report on what he's done in order to harass Trump further. I don't know what's going on with the case in the 11th Circuit where he was found to be unconstitutionally appointed. But in the end, the writing's on the wall, Pete. Right? These cases are ending, and it's just a question of how much extra pain they can cause Trump as they go out the door or kicked out the door.
I don't want to do the what if, but had Donald Trump not won, I mean, what do these cases then look like going into 2025 when it comes to how much legal peril, I mean, financial peril he would have been facing had he not won the election? It does sound like a banana republic when you set it up that way, Tom, but I think it's a realistic question that potentially could have come to fruition.
Well, they wanted him in jail, and the Democratic Party wanted to deprive him of Secret Service protection when he was in jail. So he probably would have died in jail if he hadn't won the election.
Absolutely crazy. All right, Tom, what are we watching here then going forward? You mentioned how it's technically not closed. I mean, they could come after Trump if when he's out of office come 2029, I guess that would be. But is the story now done, or is there something else that you're going to be watching beyond what Donald Trump does with his oversight of the DOJ when he gets in there in January?
Well, the left isn't going to stop, right? And, the best way to figure out what's going to happen in the future is to look what happened in the past. And the last time he came in, they constructed a set of circumstances that led to an appointment of a special counsel to harass him and his associates. So what's going to happen, I suspect, is that they are planning, and they're probably already manufacturing charges and allegations to warrant further investigation of Trump world. And they might not be able to target Trump specifically because of the new protections or the recognized protections now that the Supreme Court has ruled. But his family, people like Elon Musk, others who are in Trump's orbit, you can be sure the deep state will target even more aggressively. And those who Trump appoints needed to be on the watch and kind of squelch what are obviously going to be more political investigations and harassment by the deep state.
Last thing I want to ask you, Tom, I want to play Cut 6 on our cut sheet. This is Congressman Dan Goldman on CNN reacting to this. I want to get Tom Fitton's response to this from Congressman Dan Goldman. Let's roll Cut 6.
I think it is a shame for justice in this country. It establishes that Donald Trump is above the law. The Supreme Court put him above the law in that opinion that Paula just mentioned. But now he appears to escape full accountability for what were crimes charged by a grand jury. And I would just add one other thing that we ought to pay close attention to. We cannot normalize the fact that Donald Trump, as the president-elect, should not be held accountable for crimes that he committed before.
All right, New York Congressman Dan Goldman there on CNN. Tom Fitton, figuratively speaking, of course, slap him around a little bit for me.
Well, that was just baloney. There weren't any crimes. If you look at the indictments, any normal person looking at the indictments would have found he was being prosecuted for the non-crime of objecting to the elections as have candidates since the beginning of our country. There was nothing new that Trump said or did as it relates to objecting to elections that raised any questions about legality. So he was prosecuted for non-crimes. And what's concerning is that it got as far as it did. Indeed, he was convicted for non-crimes up in New York. That's the danger to the rule of law. So any check on that, contrary to someone who is directly involved in these abuses over the course of his career, Dan Goldman, remember before that he was part of the impeachment coup cabal against Trump in order to protect Joe Biden from his criminality being exposed. But any check on that is a victory for the rule of law. Is this the best possible outcome? No, but it's a big step towards that final outcome of accountability, and hopefully we get a system in place that stops abusing people based on their political beliefs as opposed to any actual crimes they committed.
Well said. Tom Fitton, you know him well, president of Judicial Watch. Of course, his book, Rights and Freedoms in Peril, an investigative report on the left's attack on America. Tom, thanks so much for being here on WMAL. Really appreciate it.